Shabbat Shalom. This week, as you have heard, our Torah portion included a dramatic sequence of blessings and curses. I want to focus on a week like this. We especially need the blessings. So those blessings begin and end with agricultural success, with rain in the right time, with plenitude beyond conception. So much that the person sowing the next crop will run into the people who are still harvesting last year. You'll have so much grain that you won't have room to store it all. In the middle of that sequence of blessings, there are blessings that focus on war and peace. And it is not surprising that peace would be among those blessings because, in fact, in our Jewish tradition, peace is one of the things we value most highly. It is at the conclusion of two of our three most important prayers. The Amidah, the silent standing prayer, the Kaddish, the full Kaddish, both end with a request for peace. And yet the passage that we read this morning that speaks of the blessing of peace is a little bit out of order. And I think understanding the order that it is in and how it is phrased might give us an insight, might give us an opportunity to think more deeply about what it means when we talk about peace, why we value it, and even, I dare say, how it is to be defined and achieved. So the verses read as follows: V'natati shalom ba'aretz, I will grant peace in the land. You will lie down untroubled by anyone. I will give the land respite from vicious beasts, and no sword will cross your land. So the first verse lays out there is a blessing, there is peace. There will be no violence, there will be no sword. But then the next verse takes us in a different direction. Urdafemtem et oivechem. You will chase your enemies and they will fall before you by the sword. 5 of you will chase 100, 100 will chase 10,000. Your enemies will fall before you. We struggle to understand the sequence of these verses. God says there will be peace, there will be no sword. Next thing, we're chasing people with swords, right? If you have teenagers, you understand how this goes. But at least in theory, right, the question is a little bit out of order. So Rabbi Asher Wasserthiel, who is a contemporary biblical commentator, rabbi living in Israel, was sitting in synagogue on Saturday afternoon when his neighbor asked him the same question. So if there's already peace, if the sword is put away, then why are we chasing our enemies with it in the next verse? And so Rabbi Wasserthiel, the Birkat Asher, responds with the first thing he did when the first response, every rabbi always has, you've got your answer that's ready to go, and then you have your smart answer later. So his first answer is, it's a sequence. The first sequence is there will be peace in your land, but even while there is peace in your land proper, your armies will still be chasing their enemies away. So you may be living in peace in your cities, but there's still war. The war is not over outside of your borders. And so until the enemies are routed, you guys have peace, but your soldiers are still at war. And the truth is, being able to fight a war on someone else's turf, if you are playing football, you want to play a home game. If you are playing war, you want it to be an away game, or even better, like Florida, Georgia on neutral ground, right? And as Americans, we are used to having our wars fought at a distance. We may worry, we may pray for our soldiers fighting overseas, but we don't experience it firsthand. Pearl Harbor and 9/11 were like the two exceptions, right? War is something we see on TV. It's not something that we experience on our own soil in our own homes. Now, in the rest of the world, that's not the way it works. If you tour the great cities of Europe, you'll pass the neighborhoods and the landmarks that were destroyed during World War II, sometimes by us, by the way. And October 7th, Israelis who had had, if I dare say, the luxury of having the war been at a distance, maybe only a distance of 5 or 10 miles, but a distance, suddenly understand what it meant to have the war come to their homes. And now, this week, we know what it is for war to come here, to our nation's capital, to Washington, D.C. So the American Jewish Committee was hosting that night in a Jewish museum an event for young Jewish professionals, an event on actually humanitarian aid. And outside of that event, there was a shooter waiting, and he killed 2 people, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, who happened to be 2 staffers at the Israeli embassy. I wrote a lengthy commentary this week, which I sent out. I won't repeat it, but I'll summarize. The assailant said that he did it for Gaza. And so suddenly, a war that was 6,000 miles away is being fought here. And what I mentioned there is, so this is a person, the person who did this was not a Palestinian, was not an Arab, was not from the Middle East. This was a Hispanic man from Chicago who was radicalized by what he heard in the media, on social media organizations that he was involved in. And so what I mentioned this week is that in the curses that we read, one of the curses is that you will be chased away by an aleh nidaf. The sound of a rustling leaf will chase you. And so one of the things that is happening in our world is that propaganda, particularly spread on social media and beyond, are creating propaganda and libel that are actually leading to the deaths of real people. That lies, that propaganda have consequences. And the particular irony here is that the 2 victims, one a German Israeli and one a young Jewish woman from Kansas, actually were advocates for peace. Milgram had been an employee of an organization called Tech to Peace, which provides high-tech and entrepreneurial training to young Palestinians and Israelis together, Jews and Arabs learning together how to use technology to make their societies better. And Lashinsky had been an advocate for interfaith dialogue and understanding. And so in fact, the murderer removed from the world 2 of the young people who actually could have been partners in the cause that he claimed to be supporting. And I want to point out as well that this particular attack has a personal resonance for me because these 2 young people were planning to travel to Israel to become engaged this week. And I flash back 29 years ago, 2 of my friends, Matthew Eisenfeld and Sarah Duker, were on a bus one morning. They were actually on their way to visit Petra to celebrate their engagement. And that bus was blown up by a member of Hamas. And their murder was carried out under the banner of a word, intifada. And so intifada can mean a lot of things, but as a political movement, it includes in its definition the murder of Jews wherever they are. And so today when people advocate to globalize the intifada, people being shot on the streets of America is what they mean. So if you see protesters shouting, globalize the intifada, they are saying they hope that people in this room are shot in the street. Just saying. I also mentioned that one of the challenges that we face is that the verse says that you are running and no one is chasing you. And so part of the challenge is that there is this moment of gaslighting. There are those who say, oh no, that's not what those words mean. Those words have been defined, they have been written in blood in the streets of Washington, D.C. I talked about war. Let's see if maybe we can say something about peace. So what does this promise, a sword shall not pass through your land, actually mean? Well, for one thing, it indicates a promise that those who are going to fight war will not even pass through your land. One of the things that I want to point out is that when armies are on the march, even if you are not the immediate target, you are still at risk. We live in a society where there is conflict on a range of issues, and there are so many people who are collateral damage of that conflict. Whatever side you may be on, the red, the blue, wherever you may land, those fights are having real consequences for real people who have no stake in those conflicts. About peace. Siftei Chachamim, a commentator who tries to clarify and expand on earlier interpretations, proposed that the passage, remember we said, it says there's going to be peace, and then the next thing you know, we're chasing people with swords. He says that the sequence of the verses are not chronological, rather it's what's called a chiastic structure, fancy literary word. The most important idea is actually in the middle of the passage. So you start with the stuff that's less important, you end with the stuff that's less important, the important stuff, it's in the middle. It's the opposite from what they teach you in 7th grade English. And so the blessings of plenty are first and last. The middle, the most important blessing, is the bless of peace, because without peace you have nothing. Now, Wasser Thiel also offers that the great commentators, Ramban and Ibn Ezra, and these are two commentators who rarely agree on anything, concur on a more metaphorical read of the passage. Verse 6, which speaks about peace in the land, refers to peace among the Israelites. No man will fight against his brother. And so the idea is that only when there is peace within one's own people can you resolve conflict with others. Only after you're at peace with yourself can you be at peace with anyone else. A nation cannot find solutions to external conflict if there is not a shared understanding within. And certainly if you are fighting, you can't be fighting the enemy if you are busy fighting each other. And so there are divisions with our own Jewish community, and even within Israeli society right now. There are, within Israeli politics, Israeli society debates. There are those who say that the greatest priority is to bring home our hostages, in particular 20 who are still alive, who are being held, chained in tunnels underneath civilians. And others who say, no, the most important thing is to finish the war, and if they are to be sacrificed, then that is the cost. And that is a battle that is going on in Israel at this moment. And here's where I hope maybe I can bring you some hope. Some would say that in fact you have to interpret this passage about bringing peace as a blessing in a global sense. That maybe verses 7 and 8, which talk about the sword, that in fact, V'natati Shalom is the headline. How do you do it? Well, you have to chase your enemies with the sword. That's the only way you're going to get peace, is by defeating your enemies, by bringing about their surrender. But some mystical commentators offer a different understanding. A number of our commentators suggest that this word ba'aretz, in the land, doesn't just refer to the land of Israel, because it doesn't say Israel with a capital, it just says the land. And so when the promise is that you will remove wild beasts, that corresponds to this ultimate peace that is described by Isaiah. That the very desire to prey on others, to harm others, is eliminated from the world. That not only in the biological sense does the wolf lie down with the lamb, but human beings no longer seek each other's harm. And so you don't have to be a particularly astute reader to think about how these different understandings of peace might be applied to the situations that weigh on our hearts at this moment. Can we even think about having peace with others when we are at war with our own selves? Is peace accomplished through compromise? Or is peace accomplished only by chasing our enemies with the sword? Is it sufficient to have peace in one's own land? Indeed, is it possible to have peace in one place if there is not peace everywhere? Or is the biblical promise only fulfilled when peace is everywhere? And this is perhaps the biggest question. You can perhaps bring about the military defeat of an enemy. You can shoot a person. Will that actually bring about true peace? Or does there actually need to be a fundamental change in human understanding for the world to change? We live in a moment where those fundamental questions remain unanswered. The passages that we read in Leviticus week, the curses are much longer than the blessings. But the curses end with the promises that those blessings will indeed in the end come to pass. That is our hope. That is our prayer. Shabbat Shalom.